As we are all aware, he has been photographing architectural and design works across Asia for over 20 years. With his experience as an architect, a keen eye for aesthetics, and the experience of understanding light, he is always keen on creating images of buildings and structures lifelike as possible. His principal aim is maintaining proportions and producing honest images while achieving technical excellence on every assignment. His works have been widely published in a diverse range of architectural and design journals across the world. An alumni of Goa College of Architecture, a fellow Goan, if I may say so, and most importantly, my very best friend. I am pleased and honored to introduce to you architect Harshan Thomson.
Thank you. I think before I start, just a minute to thank Siddha for this wonderful opportunity, and also congratulate him on 25 years of his starting his office, his practice based in Goa, one of the most sincere guys I've ever known. Okay, so when Siddha mentioned this to me, I thought, okay, let me put together a few of the, I was saying earlier to a smaller group that this presentation I have actually put together. The initial few projects that I'll be talking about are the ones that are really not commission work. They are more out of interest that I go and shoot some of these projects because of my interest in architecture, and of course, which is why I get to shoot. Which is why I like to shoot these buildings. So before I get into my work, I would like to briefly speak about the genre of architectural photography itself, because there are a lot of youngsters here who I think should realize, or rather should know, the importance of an architectural photographer and why it's important to document the works that you do, or the works that the firm that you're working for. I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with all these iconic buildings and images itself, actually. So these were shot by very famous architects. They are the pioneer photographers of our era, if I may say. Ezra Stoller, Julius Schulman. They created, or rather they formed, this entire genre of architectural photography, and they were responsible in a way to influence the works of very, very famous architects like Frank Lloyd Wright, Richard Newcroft. So as you know, Corbusier mentioned that he has the soul of an architect. So the point I'm trying to make here is how critical or how important it is to document work. I keep saying that to all my colleagues, all my friends who I know as architects, that please don't ignore the work that you've done, whatever it is. Please document it. A few years later, you would have wished you had a good set of images, and not just because we've got these iPhones and we just think we take pictures and say, okay, that's enough. But I would think it would be appropriate, or even better, if you have images that are shot by a professional, the right time, with the right light, and which enhances or shows the beauty of the work that you've been doing. So today, what I'll do is I'll actually showcase a few, like I mentioned earlier, quickly, 3 or 4 projects that were done by so-called star architects, the new term that has been coined of late, in Asia. Their works. So I've been following their works across, but whenever they come closer, it's a lot easier for us to do. So nothing is a good example than this particular building, why it is important to document architecture. This building, which was part of the World Expo in 2010, was the UK pavilion designed by Thomas Heatherwick. Thomas Heatherwick, as you know, is one of the leading designers in the world right now, and this pavilion was the UK's representation at the expo. The main theme of the expo was Future of Cities, and so the big idea over here was to create a structure in a way which basically showcased United Kingdom's a long history of bringing nature in cities. Now, if you see this building, I just put in a section there just to explain to so many architects. Basically, it's a pavilion that consists of 2 parts. The central part is the seat cathedral. It's called the seat cathedral for a reason I'll explain. And it's resting on almost like a piece of crinkled paper. So that was the theme idea, a very, very simple idea. Now, this building was made of about 60,000 acrylic fiber optic rods, and each of these rods had these plant seeds at their end towards the inside, and on the outside it had this little LED tips. Now, daytime, it brought in a lot of light into the structure, and in the evening, it had this glow with the light emitting outwards. Actually, this entire structure rested on a wooden framework, which then was placed on a reflective water body. As simple as that. Once you go in, you start seeing that. I don't know whether you can see this on your screen, but if you look closely, those are seeds which are embedded on the tip of seeds of plants or trees or whatever, at the tip of each of these acrylic rods. They draw in light into the building, and then you get this very surreal feel once you walk through this space. The space is nothing but an empty shell with this light and then showcasing the seeds all over, right above you, beside you, below you. And so in most of these expos, you have leading designers from all over the world building or designing these pavilions for various countries. So at this particular expo in 2010 in Shanghai, you had Norman Foster, you had Jean Nouvel, all of them with their pavilions, and most of these countries have a lot of. Once you go in, you will have drinks, snacks, film, presentations, culture, art, everything going on. And this idea of the pavilion. India had put up a bamboo pavilion. I didn't even go that side because it was too cliched for me, to do that year and year again. In any case, you have to queue a long time just to get into this place. And this one was very popular. In fact, it won the best pavilion of the Expo award. And just to get into that pavilion, you queue, and then you get inside, there's nothing. There's no music, no welcome drinks, no snacks, not even a film. You just go in. So the Chinese over there were pretty disappointed that they go in. But then they realized, that just spending time, just hanging around, the whole idea of this was not about what's inside or what they have to, offer. The offering was just the idea of this seed as a pavilion, like they call it, within this landscape space. It almost felt like being in a rendering. It's a very, very, very eerie feeling it was. Another thing, if you notice, just behind that lady standing there, you'll notice this. From any angle that you look at this, right, you have the formation of a Union Jack. It's really amazing. You look at the building, you can look at it from any angle. You will start seeing the Union Jack being formed by the way he spaced the acrylic rods. Now, this building was used as a backdrop for various events, for people just posing, and it was really popular. And you had lots of people in the evening coming and spending time around it instead of inside it, unlike all the other pavilions. So once this expo was over, this entire building disappeared. All the plastic rods were reused. The seeds were planted across Shanghai and across China and UK. And obviously 10 years later, I'm pretty sure you have a lot of trees that have come from this particular expo. And every bit of it was reused. So it was a very, very, very sensitive, and everything was sourced within a 30-kilometer radius, this entire structure. So it was an amazing way of actually building. And now the point again I made about why documenting is important. So these images and the ones taken by others are the only ones left of a building that disappeared. So again, it shows the importance. And this particular building was the breakthrough moment for Heatherwick. Before this, well, he was a up-and-coming designer, but this really put him in the limelight. The next building that I'm going to talk about is in Singapore. This was designed again by Thomas Heatherwick. This is his first completed project in Asia after the expo, which was technically a temporary building. This building, as you can see, is very organic shaped structure. It is actually a sort of a learning hub for a university called the Nanyang Technology University. And as you can see, he had actually used, so that's a real plan of the building. It's not a sketch, and this is how the building was formed. Basically, these are like very amoeboid shaped structures, and at various levels, they kind of move in and out. And these little fingers that you see are little meeting discussion areas with a lot of openings or gaps in between, which allow for natural ventilation to happen. Very unique for Singapore because as you can see in Singapore, most buildings are very stiff and straight and glass and air conditioned. This was exactly not that. It was all about the structure. It was all about purely exposing the inside, bringing in the light, air. There was no air conditioned cubicles inside here. A lot of greenery inside, very retro looking in terms of the fixtures, the fittings used, the furniture. And so it was a departure from what one would normally associate with architecture in Singapore. And as you can see, a flowing timber handrail, cum planter, providing a comfortable, railing to rest. I just put this model just to, I just realized when I was shooting, look at these almost impossible looking columns that are going in a funny angle and coming up. Are they really supporting the structure? Actually, these columns, they form a sort of a load-bearing structural column. They look almost impossible, but they form two sides of the atrium and thus balance each other out with opposing forces reconciled at the top. So it was actually a well thought out structural design as well. And you see those railings and look at the quality of light that flows in. It was really amazing. Even the furniture that was placed. These the external skin are basically a modular concrete panels. So there is a certain rhythm to it, and so that they could repeat the number of panels they could use in the entire structure, because and it is a very green building in that sense. This next building is one of, or rather, Rem Koolhaas's first project that he's completed in the Middle East. This started, I think, in 2015, and in a couple of years it was inaugurated. It's called Concrete. It's at a place called Al Sakal Avenue, about 20 minutes drive from central Dubai. Can you see my cursor when I'm moving it?
Yes.
Okay, so that's Dubai, the city, and it's about a 20-minute drive from the main city. And you had this very dilapidated, or rather old warehousing area. And one of the, owners of a large section of this decided to convert it into a contemporary art gallery. And so you have various events happening, various spaces for artists, for, restaurants, and you have, sculpture studios. And so this particular piece over here, what Rem Koolhaas worked on. It's a very simple existing structure, and he's added on a few elements to create some called the concrete. Now that's from the outside, from the rear part of it. As you see, the same existing warehouse, he's just done a concrete blasting, what you see over here, with mirror chips in it, just to differentiate the building, so that as it gets to evening, you have these shining bits of mirror and glass within the facade. And on the other side, you have this polycarbonate sheet with this huge plaza, and then you have these polycarbonate sheet shutters or the facade which open up and which bring in light, which can be opened up. I'll show you some images later. And it was an amazing space created, and we were part of an Art Asia forum, which is why I could go there. As you can see, that's an exploded view of the building. That part is the rear part of the building, which you see over there, and that's the acrylic sheets in front. The inside space is a very flexible space. What you see in red are movable walls. These walls can be configured the way you wish. So you can create large spaces, smaller subdivided spaces, or just clear it out of the way. These circular elements over here are the tracks that run, and I can show you an image how that works later. So coming back to when I shoot, what I look for is, interesting elements which can complement the architecture. Now there's these seats over here, which had this very reflective mirrors placed on the edge of the other side of the pathway. And so, of course, I took a vantage point. First of all, I had to clean up this entire thing. It was quite a mess, actually. So most photographers, I think, would know it, that you will carry a piece of cloth or something with you. So wipe it clean so you minimize your work going back in post-production. So you end up doing a bit of housekeeping and cleaning and setting the stage for your lovely composition. And then when you just finish that, boom, this young lad decides to come and sit. Wow. And that was perfect for me, because I think this picture is a lot more interesting than the one where I got this young boy with his football over there. So anyway, so I've got these two shots, and he sat there. He didn't realize that he was actually in the way in my frame at all, but it is something that happens, serendipity, I would say. And then you have scenes, you walk, spend the day, you see this, contrasts in color, in mood. Because of the texture of the building, you have, like these kids were feeling the texture, again, as you see how it's just a mundane looking building, but then you have, you are actually finding it to be interactive. Then you get this beautiful formation of shade coming from the neighboring warehouse buildings. Look for these, I'm just looking out for how I can compose based on them. So this is the entire building, as you can see, with the polycarbonate sheets and the alleyway leading to the space. The sheets again. Details, I mean, I'll try to see if I can see how he actually combined, the materials. Basically, that's the concrete with the mirror chips, and the way it's, the groove, and it's amazing the way it's all. It's very few materials used in this, but each and every element has been treated with such care. It is amazing to see each and every detail, the way the light was embedded into it, the bench kept there, the stainless steel frame around the door. Every element was detailed to the T. Even the signage, it was so beautifully done. Now that's what you see, that's the plan of the space. That's just a rectangular space with the multiple configuration of the walls. As you can see, those are the walls that are moving. That's 600 square meters, and that's the balance space. And you can create various configurations within the space. The day we were there, what we had was an event of where we were actually talking about the future of museum collections, which was very interesting. And then we had this large space in front. Basically, it's this configuration. I'll show you. It's this one, right in the middle, where you have a space, a rectangular space with the stage over there, and a long space over here with a very long table for your post-meeting discussions, to have your meal and your, just a gathering space. I'll just show you what I mean. That's the space behind, which is a long table, which, of course, because I was part of the event, I could just set up my camera and wait for everybody to come and just occupy this entire space. So it was really nice how the space was being used. Again, just to look at little details of how the door was embedded. I mean, this sliding door goes in and shuts flat over there. It's beautifully detailed over here. Just two materials over here, concrete and stainless steel. Again, the corridor leading to it. Those are not my pictures, because the day event I was there, I couldn't get an open space, but I just put a couple of images which I sourced from their website, but just to give you a feel of how it would be to see it when it's fully open to the plaza, that event space. Right. The next building that interested me a lot, and I've been waiting for it to open, it took a long time to finish, was the Louvre in Abu Dhabi by Jean Nouvel. As you all know, the Louvre in Paris, and then this Louvre over here took a very long time, because constructing it was not very easy. I mean, it was in the sea. It was like a man-made island, and this entire thing, the main aspect of this particular building is this huge dome. It's a 180-meter diameter dome, which consists of eight different layers, and we'll go into that a little later. But just to get there and just to see this, or something, simply because it was a brilliant piece of architecture, and I'm sure everybody knows how great it will be for photographers, because the amount of light, the way the light will be peering through those openings created in that dome. So that's the section that I found really interesting, because it's basically the dome, and then that's like a set of white Medina buildings. Basically, it's like a museum city, which he was looking at. And then when I was driving by, I was thinking, can I get an image that looks like that section? And of course, that was the closest I thought, and it's like from a section to an image, And yes, I got the cab driver to stop and on a bridge on a highway, which was highly restricted, and quickly got this shot and moved on, which clearly showcases how beautifully the structure sits within the sea. Obviously, an aerial shot of it would be even more amazing, but I couldn't achieve that. So as you arrive closer to the structure, you start seeing the dome, how it's actually nestled about these white rectangular blocks. You have this sort of a canopy, screen canopy leading you into the building. And then when you arrive at the plaza, that's the arrival plaza, where you, before you walk into the ticketing booth, you've got tons of people over here. So I wanted to get an image where I have less people. Of course, a few people in the image is always good because that gives you scale and kind of context. So one of the tricks that we all do as photographers is try and put in something called an ND filter here. It's basically a dark filter. It's like wearing on a pair of glasses over your eyes to darken the scene so that the camera or the sensor feels like it's very, very dark, and so you can have a longer exposure. So this is about a 3-minute exposure, within which time the people who move around the scene, they kind of disappear. You don't see, there are a lot of people moving around here. They've all moved so much that they don't come in the frame at all. And these are the ones who actually just sat there for, or rather were there for about 2-3 minutes without much movement. So they come clearly, just to give a little bit of how you try and capture an image with no people in the scene. You can actually get it even longer exposure by darkening the lens even more by stepping up the filters, and then you can clear out everyone in the scene if you wish to, and get a completely clean scene even when there's a crowd. So that's one of the tricks. And in the bargain, what you get is these cloud movements, because as you see during the long exposure, the clouds move and you get this dynamic movement in the sky. Okay, I just put in this plan just as I had gone there thanks to Cedric and Gauri. Cedric is our classmate from school. Cedric is Siddharth and my classmate. So they used to live in Dubai, and they took me to this place the first day. I think he's listening in, and they came along. And so that was in the evening. I just put in this just to kind of briefly, for people who haven't been there and would be going there, just to let you know. So this, you arrive around somewhere around here, and that's the arrival main entrance and checkpoint. All these in red or rust color that you see is of the museums, and the dome, what the dotted dashed line is the dome, obviously. But if you wish to just enjoy the exhibition, of course, by all means, the museum is here. But when you are doing that, you don't get a feel of the dome at all. That's one of the things about this particular museum, unlike the others that I visited. To get a real feel of that, you need to enter that spine, which means you need to go through this entire exhibition. And the exhibition is so amazing that by the time you do this, if you're really interested in the museum and the collection they have, it'll take a long time before you reach here. And so one of the things that I think to do is to go directly to that space, enjoy the architecture. I would say that enjoy the architecture and go back in and enjoy the museum. It's up to you what your intention is, because otherwise by the time you get here, one, it may be too crowded if you've started early, because everyone's in the museum, everyone will come here at the same time. And two, the light would have completely moved to some other direction. So this was the second day, which I went alone without Cedric and all that, because I wanted to capture, we had gone the evening. This is the right, I figured out the right time would be to get the right light and, with the right amount of people. And basically this huge dome is about, like I said, about 5 meters in height, just the dome in section, 5 meters. And it's 4 layers of stainless steel and 4 inner layers of aluminum, 4 outer layers of stainless steel clad. It's just a massive structure which is supported on like these. This is one of the supports system, which is, there are only 4 of them. It's resting on it. And this space has this sort of white boxes, which are basically the spaces where the museum exhibits are showcased. And like I said, you don't feel the museum, or rather the dome, when you're inside it. That was the intention, I guess. The idea was to focus on the exhibition rather than the architecture while you are in the museum. Yeah, these are only the public spaces. As you can see, that's the resting space, and it just flies like a spaceship above the structure. The scale of it, just to look at that, look at these 2 guys over there and see the size, the humongous scale, of this particular dome, and the weaving of the, there is a certain rhythm and pattern in the ceiling that was, they worked on it in various models to simulate and get the right graphic eventually. Yeah, I mean, this is a photographer's delight. You can go on shooting as much as you want. We really had, and as the sun sets, you get a completely different feel because the way the lighting is done is simply amazing. You know, as the sun is setting, you start seeing this. And I was waiting for somebody to come in right in the line of the sunset to get this nice shadow formation over here. And then, you know, if the water is really still, is when you get reflections, you know. So I was just hoping to get some reflection, and this is the seawater coming in. You had this, this is the entry, and now, of course, I was hoping to see how it will look in the evenings. In the evenings, you had this screen that was lit up against that. This is a picture that I didn't take. It was taken by Cedric. I just put it in just for you to get a feel of what the inside is. The inside of the museum is just this. It has absolutely no connection to what's going on outside, but it is so beautifully controlled in terms of lighting. So what you see in the middle, this bluish sort of patch, is natural light coming in, supplemented with artificial lighting to give you the perfect light inside the space. It's controlled lighting so that the reflections in these solid glass, bulletproof glass panels are minimized, and you can really enjoy the exhibition without distraction, without too much glare and reflection. So this was very, very thoughtfully and intentionally done. But just to give a point, unlike the Guggenheim, which I shot about, I think, 15 years back now, it's a long time, where every space, probably the most...
Harshan,
yeah, sorry.
You should also mention that one of your pictures of the Louvre was reposted by Jean Nouvel himself.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Well, that was a highlight when that happens, actually. That did happen. Jean Nouvel's office posted 3 of my images, actually, and that was really thrilling to see, because they actually, I mean, somebody actually acknowledging, and not only Jean Nouvel's, also the structural designer, Bureau Huppold, the guys would, because I think there's huge involvement of the structural designer in this, and they actually wrote to me talking about how beautifully the images were, and that is a thrill, you know, when you hear from the designers and that they appreciated what you've shot. So
no, I think you've done a great job also with the photograph. I haven't seen better photographs of the building.
Hey, thank you so much, Cedric. Coming from you, it's a lot. Okay.
I'm not a photographer.
Okay. Well, so this particular building, as we know, is the most famous building. We all know about it. But this museum, when Frank Augueri designed it, it was meant to actually give you a feel inside out. Every part of it, wherever you go, you get to feel the structure, the sinuous curves, the movement, the dynamism is everywhere to see. It's not just on the outside. You know, it's a completely different take. So I thought I'll just put this in, you know, just to get a feel how from the inside and the outside looked as dramatic as ever, you know, including the bridge and the tower and everything. So those were the projects that I thought I'll just showcase of the architects that in Asia that I have captured. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly run through the non-star architects. I would say architects who have done work, and I've been documenting, or rather say, let's say, commissioned projects. So here's one. This is, okay, well, I'll just put in we ourselves do a bit of architecture. So this particular project I just put in here just to showcase how, I mean, this is an opportunity not only to design, and of course, I'm in a privileged position where I can get to shoot our own projects. So this is a project that we designed in Kodaikanal, and that's the building that was set on the edge of a cliff. As you can see, that's the cliff, and that's a huge valley. It's a beautiful valley. It's a small site. We got an amazing location to play with. And that's the view. I mean, that I had a drone. First time I'm using a drone to shoot this so that I could go right up there and get a view of how the building is set on within the landscape. So one could actually get a feel of how beautifully the building was snugly setting in. So then some of the other aspects of the building that I would cover, not only for ourselves or generally architects in general, are try to capture the essence. And most of the time, what I like to do is not purely shoot architecture or interiors separately. For me, the way I shoot, I love to see how spaces blend in, how they move in from inside to outside. You know, whether it is shooting and you know, like this was trying to showcase the facade, but again, it's how the outside space is connecting to the inside as well as to the landscape, you know. As you can see, that's the arrival zone. That's from the neighboring space, the neighboring site, how one would actually look at it, a one-point perspective of that. Similarly, again, trying to see what I can see inside while outside. Early mornings, how does the light play in, very early with the light from inside coming out. That's artificial light blending with the sun that is about to rise over here. The sun is just risen. Again, at noon, you get this beautiful play of light on semi-covered spaces, how the interior spaces connect to the exterior or the semi-open and to the outside. How does one feel that? Of course, at dusk, what happens to the building? And then, what happens if you look at it a little later? And I generally don't try to shoot after this dusk hour. I don't like darker skies than this. This is the maximum that I would go. Anything darker is something that I don't prefer personally. So wherein I feel that you still see the landscape around as well as the building. You have some amount of detail still on the buildings, and it's not called completely dark. And yeah, so that this is about a 5 or 10 minute period in the evening. They call the blue hour. There's no hour. It's just about 5-10 minutes that you can get. Another project, I shoot a lot for this particular firm called Harshan Associates. Okay, I thought, let's move away from India and go to a nice peaceful location, look at some beautiful places. This is actually a resort in the middle of Maldives. And here the architecture and interiors were both done by Harsh Bednar. So we could actually see how I tried to frame the building. I waited for that yacht to come in from a distance while I positioned my camera and waited for it to come at the right place. These were, as I mentioned earlier to you, the to get movement in the cloud, how you do use the ND filter, and so that is the darkening the lens for the non-photographers out here, and you can get this sort of an effect, and you can get a smoother water, as you can see, instead of that's the type of water that you would see otherwise. Actually, you see this, that's the difference. That's because the water's moved and you've got a very smooth water. So that's the inside to connecting to the outside of the space of the bedrooms. Each unit has its own pool. Just move on, and of course they use a lot of local handicraft, bamboo and material like that. Structures is beautifully done property. I try as much as possible to see, even when you shoot interiors, to see how one can connect to the exteriors. And that's what I love about shooting buildings, which are not just purely about the interiors or the architect or the, most of the time, I try and avoid, I don't do too much of those pure interior shots. I love to do this sort of, you can see how the deck blends in with the water in the pool and waiting for the sunset. I kind of noticed that this long deck actually leading to these various cottages. I'm hoping to get that. That's the evening sunset. Again, one of the restaurants, one of the decks sitting there. Yep, this is my cottage. One of the privileges of actually shooting some of these resorts is they have no choice but to put you up in this. There's not, on that island, there's only this particular resort. So you get to, they are forced to put you up in one of these cottages. Yeah, so yeah, that's these the all-day dining and the kind of light that is coming in while you're having breakfast. One of the other specialty restaurants that open up into the sea. Yeah, so I'll finish with this very interesting assignment that I did end of last year, in which I was supposed to continue doing this year, but thanks to this current situation, I can't go there. This is the Great Scotland Yard building in UK, in London. So this particular building used to be the earlier headquarters of the Scotland Yard, and they sold it to a developer who bought it and converted it into a boutique hotel. This particular assignment was to actually shoot pictures of the building details. It was for a book they were doing on for the launch of the hotel by the owners, not the designers. So they wanted me to capture aspects of the building, whatever I felt would make for compelling viewing. So the brief was very interesting. So I went around and looked at various details. Like this is actually a toilet door. On a toilet door, on a washroom door, they've got these little poems written engraved into the door, which is so interesting because once you close the door and you're staring, instead of staring at a blank door, you can actually read a little poem when you're doing your business in the bathroom. So it's really nice, poems and paintings. So I could actually look out and pull out a lot of details, the highly detailed property. It was so beautiful. And of course, they had a lot of art and they collected a lot of these memorabilia which are related to the property because of the Scotland Yard connection. So, and as you can see, this was a beautiful art commission for the property. This Sardar over here is supposedly the first Sardar cop in Great Scotland Yard. There's Jack the Ripper. There are all others in this beautiful collage of an artwork. And that's the city map of London with the River Thames in gold just above the bathtub and a very ornate bathroom. The door of this was the one I was talking to about earlier about the little poem written on it. The bedrooms were designed very, very almost monochromatic. We just tiled it very simply. I found a little bowler hat lying around, just put it there, and kept it very minimal. Tried to see how much amount of daylight can come into this property. Because in London, to get daylight into properties is very good because most of these properties are very small windows actually. But this one had a lot of light coming in, very monochromatic sort of property. This is a suite which is connecting to two spaces. And the bar, they call it 40 Thieves because there were 40 thieves who were very famous during those days. They couldn't catch them ever. So and she was the captain of those 40 thieves. So they named it after that bunch of thieves. So one of the things that we do normally for spaces like this is you do a 2-point perspective shot like this one, and then you get your 1-point perspective. That's a trick which generally works most of the time, for interior shots. Well, one of the things I do in this is also shoot food. You always, and as photographers, when you're told to shoot something outside your expertise, it's so much more fun because there's not so much pressure on you to perform because you are doing it out of your interest, and they're not expecting you to come with great images. Even there, as architecture photographers, you tend to keep everything straight. You see all the lines are straight everywhere. The background lines are straight. I put a light. I had carried my gear, put a light behind that glass casks, set up these barrels. I did some interesting photo food shots. It was something that I normally don't do, but I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, you can eat. I realized when I'm doing food photography that none of these things are edible. These guys create all these things, and create these textures. And the chef tells me, please don't eat them. We've put in some kind of dyes and colors and created this food. That was a revelation to me actually. So I was hoping to kind of munch into them after I shoot, but no, you can't touch these things. This particular shot was quite challenging simply because I had only about, this road was about 6 + 4, about 10 meters wide. And there's a very large facade, almost a 5-story building. And this was the only image that they had told me was a must, simply because this would become the cover of the book. And they wanted to actually wrap around the entire image of the book. So they wanted an almost panoramic as wide as possible, the entire thing. And given that sort of working distance, it was nearly impossible to get the entire building. So in fact, this is actually a composition of about 9 shots taken with the widest tilt-shift lens called the 17 Canon lens, which is the widest tilt-shift lens available. And you can actually move. I mean, I have got a special adapter which I can allow me to move in all directions and capture the entire image circle of that lens to get me this particular image, and I stitched it together. And of course, they used it as the cover of the book eventually that was released over there. That's what I was doing. And of course, I tether always and shoot. So you can see the cable there. That's my assistant. And that's the highest I could go on the other side of the road to capture that particular image. Okay, before I end, as you can see me there, and just behind me, can you see that bus? That's the London bus. That London bus, as you can see, again, is designed by Thomas Heatherwick. Thomas Heatherwick is, the one that we spoke about right at the beginning. That bus I think in 2000, early 2000, the route master of this bus. If you have time, please go and have a look at how beautifully this bus was designed. It's an amazing piece of product design by itself. And this is the buses that you will see going around London now from the old buses that used to be there. Thomas Heatherwick is not an architect, but he is an amazing artist. So that's his one of his creations. I just realized it when I put this, happened to be having a bus here. Thank you so much. I think that's all for now. I think we are on time, Siddha.
Yes, very much. We would have still loved to see more of your projects. They were very amazing to see in terms of photography, and certain buildings actually came out much better than what they would actually be, I guess, because of your photographs.
It's fab, man. Really wonderful. One thing I just wanted to comment is that I'm incredibly jealous that you got this opportunity to shoot all these international projects, because it's something that's not easy to do. One very important question, which I've been meaning to ask you, and something which, I always, what do you feel about Ivan Barnes' work? Because it's a completely distinct and very different genre of architectural photography. And the thing is, he's become like a superstar. He's shooting for everybody. And Rem Koolhaas gave this opportunity to him. I met him. He was in Bombay. We spent like 3 days together. With Ivan. Yeah. So, we did a lot of selfies and stuff like that. Great fun guy to be with. I mean, he shoots without a tripod. He's only 35mm Canon. And he's got a Canon, and he's got a super wide angle lens, and then he's got one small little bag with his Mavic in it, his drone in it, and he's a one-man show. I mean, and he just shoots. He's just shooting all the time, every day. He's somewhere or the other shooting something differently. What do you think of his work? What do you think of that approach? He's including people continuously now, something which not every architect used to want, at least as far as classical work is concerned. But just generally, personal take on Ivan.
Yeah, so Bharat, I think for those who are, I'm sure many of you all already know about Ivan, but I think if you don't, please go and Google his work, Ivan Barn, Iwan Daan. If you can just check out. So basically, Ivan has been around for the last, I think, 10 years. I haven't heard him before that. Yes, he is very fortunate that he got recognized by the same star architects that we are talking about, basically. He's not. I am I'm a purist. I prefer the older style of photography where it's more a contemplative approach, where you actually choose the amount of people or or elements in your scene, and you wait for the light. Whereas Ivan's approach, I think, generally is all about capturing the essence of the place without actually bothering too much about technique and curating it as much as the way we curate it. I think that's probably why maybe I have a feeling these architects got bored of these very curated sort of images that we were doing, and that's what happened. And they were suddenly thrilled to see somebody come by and give them these very honest images with pure, people moving in.
Kachra lying on the streets and rubbish lying everywhere, and there's no.
I think it's a fad. I'm not definitely will never do something like that.
Yeah, I find it difficult.
I wanted to imitate many photographers, but he's not the one that I would imitate for sure. But hats off to him for having actually got the attention of all these, reputed architects. Obviously, he's doing something right, which why he is where he is right now. So, but definitely my style of photography, or would want to.
But the lovely thing about him is, firstly, he's a very humble guy. He's a very quiet, soft-spoken, very gentle guy. And he differentiates his work by talking about the way buildings are used. He says, look, the building is a building, but ultimately it's the way it's used that's important as far as architecture is concerned. We look at building as form, as sculpture, and we focus entirely only on the building. And if we happen to get a person or somebody in place to give it scale, we're happy. We only use people for scale, nothing more and nothing less. He's got kids sliding and playing and, something that, I would cringe at, because also in India, as it is, it's difficult to include people in shots because you never find people decently dressed, in photograph. you have to set it up.
Distraction many times. It becomes a distraction.
Yeah,
So,
and or it becomes a distraction or gets dated very quickly, because of the clothes people are wearing or whatever.
But I would think it would be nice to have two sets of images for every building. One would be that particular style that Ivan professes, and the other one would be this very curated and very planned sort of imagery. Why not?
I think it's like what we were talking about the other day, when we do recce pictures and then with the phone, and then you can't replicate them on, on a big camera. So it's kind of, it's like that. I think we have to start delivering just those recce pictures. I think that would pretty much be Ivan's style mostly,
That was actually a pretty important point that I think Bharat raised. And it was going to come sort of lead up to the question that I had is like, how do you see one thing that I liked about your work was that you sort of interpreted the architecture through your photography. So it was not just like, okay, this is what architecture is, but this is what it is to me. So it is about the flow of space, and that's what came out through your photographs, which is why the photographer has a voice, and photography itself becomes like an independent form of art, which is not, it's just not mere, it moves beyond mere representation. And that's what I guess why Ivan chooses to have people in a certain way. So I think I wonder what my question was going to be is now in this digital age where social media and the image proliferation is so widespread, where everyone has a camera and is shooting, goes to these amazing buildings, captures them, is available for everyone to see. How do you see a role of a photographer changing from before this social media age to after the advent of widespread Instagram, Facebook, and what do future photographers do differently or will do differently in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, actually. And I knew somebody would ask, and so you asked me that. So the thing is, actually, you're right. I mean, with so many options to take pictures and so many pictures of like the buildings that I showed also, I'm sure there are so many images out there on the net. So I guess for not only for the photographer, for the architect or who are the designer, it becomes all the more important to have a set of images that actually represent his vision. Okay, what I mean by that is these images are taken at odd times, right? Many of them without any, I mean, they are basically taken out of their own, the reason for it could be multitude. The photographers are shooting on phone cameras and all that. So, and when you get an architectural photographer who's actually studied the intent of the architect or the designer, and then you go and kind of document it with that in mind. In a way, I always felt what we do is a bit of a I don't know if I want a better word, it's a bit of a cheating, simply because we are actually taking a shot or a frame at a time, like in those images that you see, which is basically a fleeting moment. That moment is probably missed by most people because they are doing so many things. And then we put this image, and for us, we are doing that the only thing we are doing is taking that particular shot and looking and waiting for that particular time to come. That probably is just a microsecond. You got the shot, and then you go and say, hey, this is the building. But that event in that building could have been such a small moment, but then we go and celebrate that particular image. So that's why I feel that is a bit of a lie in that sense, that what we do as photographers. But then having said that, if you see throughout the years, right, whether it's starting from those amazing photographers, the pioneers that I spoke about, all of them were also actually waiting for that moment to capture the light in all these buildings, And so if you are able to do that, and give that in the building, you have actually succeeded in giving the architect or the designer or the whole what do you call that, the designer's fulfillment of his intention. Now, whether the viewer, how many viewers have seen it, even if that one person has seen it, is very happy about it, and you've captured it, And so there'll be many such people who will eventually, over a period of time, notice it, going forward. I didn't put some of these images of the IIM in Ahmedabad. I don't know, some of you all would have seen it on my Instagram feed, some of the shots. Those are actually images of, if you see of IIM, which Louis Khan had done, those are fleeting moments that I've captured of the light coming through. There's one particular shot of a light going through an opening, And as I was actually framing that image, I had this professor walking beside me, and he came and looked at my screen and said, wow, that looks beautiful. He's looking at my screen and saying beautiful. I said, Professor, look there, it's more beautiful over there. Then actually, then I understood from him, they miss this, they don't look at it at all. He's been there for over, I don't know, 10 years teaching, but he never noticed that beautiful play of light on the wall and flow, and then he saw it only on my screen. I always shoot tethered meaning I connect it to a laptop, and I always like to see big images, unlike a lot of photographers. And so he could see it big on my screen and said, wow. I said, you don't have to see it here, you can see it there. It's even more amazing. So that's exactly my point, actually. People miss out on these. And so once they see it on images created by architectural photographers who have been commissioned, are doing it intentionally, and you see a flood of these images going out, next time a layperson goes to that building, you will actually watch out for, you will start looking at, oh, wow, I'd seen it. It's the memory recollection. Oh, I've seen this image somewhere. Let me now. Oh, I've seen it. Oh, that's how so beautiful. So when you go to the Louvre in Abu Dhabi next, you'll be watching for this play of light, and you might actually even want to go straight to that rather than see the museum. I hope you'll do that, because I think it's simply amazing. And of course, the museum collection, you can always come back and enjoy it, because that's also equally amazing. I hope I answered your question, Varun.
Yeah. Do you have any photographers that you look up to, or if it's...
Oh yeah, many, including Bharat, everyone actually, Prashant. See, everyone is strong in their work, what they're doing in different fields. I mean, different areas of expertise. I follow everyone actually on a global level. Yes, there's a guy called Tim Griffith whom I've been following, because the thing is, Tim was based in Singapore also, just like me, and we were contemporaries, and he was always getting the prime assignments, and I used to always get the secondary assignments. So I was always looking, when do I get to shoot what Tim has been shooting? And he's moved to the California now and shoots in the US a fair bit, actually. He's amazing. There are many others, actually, because the photographers that I really follow are the ones who are technically perfect, in the sense, apart from just to get the essence, the feel of the image. The image also technically, if you zoom into every pixel in terms of the ability to actually dissect the image from a technical perspective, which one would never do as an architect or but as a photographer, for me, that's my joy, to go and pixel peep, as you call it, to look at chromatic aberrations in the image, which is not at all necessary now, because mostly what you're seeing is a visual images on the internet. Nobody's printing these days. Very less printing happens. So it doesn't really matter. Yeah, there are photographers I learn all the time.
Harshan, I have a small question to ask you. It's a little technical. I think you talked about exposure, which is almost around 3 minutes with a dark filter, right? So I believe you've done a much longer exposure for the Colosseum. I thought you would show the photograph of the Colosseum, because when I had gone there, I could see it filled with people. And there was one photograph from you where there were none of the people seen. So it was like a haunted place. Yes. How do you do that? And what is the longest exposure that you have done in your photography?
So that was about very long exposure. So, in photography parlance, the filter that's used is called a neutral density filter. Okay, a neutral density filter is nothing but your dark piece of glass. It's black. The blackest black is so black, the filter, that if you look through it, you can't see anything. You'd wonder, how is the camera or the sensor able to see anything at all? It's so dark. It's called 10x or a 10 times. It's also called a big stopper, big stopper, because it stops the maximum amount of light from entering the lens. Then you've got the little stopper, which stops little bit of light. So you've got all this, and you've got various degrees of ND filters. So the more darker you want to get, you stack more of these black filters on to a point you don't see anything. So basically what you do is you actually compose your scene without any filters on. You get all your readings, meter readings, that's your exposure and your shutter speed. Then actually there is an app that will tell you, because you can download, it's called the Lee filter app, Lee. Lee is a company that makes these ND filters. And then you just put in, okay, without any filter, this is the time limit. This is the aperture that I'm shooting at, f11 or f8 or whatever it is. And this is the time that is needed. Now, suppose I'm putting 3 filters or 8 a single filter. It'll tell you, if you put a big stopper, you need to get a time of 3 minutes or 4 minutes or 8 minutes. So depending on the number of people, if you see so many people, you can stack your filters, I don't know, 8 or 9 or 10 minutes, put it on, and then look at the filter. I mean, the app will tell you the time, and then just switch it on and wait. People are moving. The good thing is, and people keep moving, after you're finished recording, you'll realize that there's nobody in the scene, because anybody with the sensor is recording so slowly that any movement is erased out, because it's what's after that comes into the scene. So you can actually technically get no one in the scene if you have a really, really long exposure. Yeah.
And sometimes you do prefer people coming in your screen,
Yeah,
right?
of course, many times. That's what we were discussing about Ivan Barnes' photography.
Right.
Right. He has people in all his shots, and it is really interesting. That's another way of actually documenting. Yep.
How do you mount that filter on a wide angle?
Okay, so the widest angle, Prashant, Prashant, right?
Yeah, Prashant, yeah, sorry.
Prashant, the widest lens that I have to, if at all I have to use it, is on the 17 tilt shift, like right? That doesn't have a filter thread, unlike all the others. The 24, of course, has a filter thread. All the others have. So I have 2 sets of filters because of ease of travel and carrying. So the 24 I have got the regular stack-on filter threads.
Yeah.
Okay, but if you stack on too much, obviously you get vignetting. If it's not a problem, then you can stack on. The 17 mm, I've got a wide-angle pano, like a hood, where you can slide in.
Like cocaine used to have.
Like cocaine used to have. You have the bigger ones. I can actually share with you images of that. So I carry that if I want on a 17 mm. That's really wide, and that's a big filters. Those are really 120 mm filters, because the lens is so wide, you don't want vignetting or darkness to happen around it. So you can stack any number of filters in that.
Sure, phenomenal presentation. There are. It reminds you that if there are many ways of writing something, it's almost like you're composing poetry. So it's nice to see what you saw in these projects, including the details, what you saw in Jean Nouvel's, what spaces you liked, how you captured it. So it's not so much a question, but I wanted to just make a few comments, because it reminded me of some very important moments in my life through your eyes now. The first one was when I first looked at Corbusier's Oeuvre Complete, his monograph, which of course is filled with only black and white images, right? And he published it in around 1958 or 55, when Chandigarh was not finished. And what he did is, instead of publishing photographs of the completed buildings like the High Court and the Assembly, which he could have, he chose not to show any photographs of the completed work, and only showed photographs of the construction process, which was incredibly fascinating, because he was so taken by the act of pouring concrete in a way that was not done in Europe, that he was not interested in the final, being Corb. I mean, imagine the ultimate formal architect.
Absolutely.
And so if you look at that, it just reminded me of when you were showing the first pavilion, of how just the process through which it is made. So I found your comment very beautiful, that that is a temporary thing, right? So with the exception of your photographs now, there is nothing there to give us evidence of that piece. And then the second one was, this is a personal story, and I would like to hear your opinion about this. So I went to Chandigarh 15 years after I graduated from Goa College of Architecture. I had never been there. But like all of you, having admired Corbusier's work so much, I used to read all these books and have photographs of his work in books by William Curtis. But it was only after I went to Chandigarh that I realized that they had all lied to me. And I mean, I'm just joking, but I'm telling you what I'm saying. Because Chandigarh looked completely different from the pristine, clean, beautiful photographs without any people in them. And I went there, and there were barbed wires, so it was fascinating to me how I like what you said very much, that you would do 2 photographs, one without people and one with people. And I'm only saying this because years ago, I was walking with a very famous architect and up in Tokyo, and we saw the Yoyogi Stadium. You know, we were walking uphill, the famous Yoyogi Stadium, and there was a farmer's market in front of it. And this famous architect pulled out his camera, and he was about to take a picture, and he said to me, Bobby, you know, Vinayak, darn it, man, I can't get a clean shot of the building. There are people in front of it. And I kept absolutely quiet. So I very much like what you said, that if you were given the choice, you would take two pictures. You would take one which fulfills the form and all the amazing stuff that we love about buildings, but you would not miss. And I saw that in your work too. You captured not just the light and the form of the building beautifully, but also the activity. So I thought it was really, really enlightening. Beautiful work, supremely talented, which I didn't know when I was studying it at GCA.
Late bloomer. Thank you so much.
Very nice.
Means a lot coming from you, actually. So that's one of the advantages of shooting public buildings. The thing is, as I mentioned earlier, these public buildings that I shot were not commissioned projects, and I enjoy shooting them simply because you have an opportunity to capture the activity or rather the life of a building. Whereas when you shoot private projects, I mean, there's nobody in the scene normally unless you plant somebody. There's this photographer called Fernando. He's very famous. I think the most followed architecture photographer. He always plants people in his images. You know, it's basically either someone walking in the scene or someone sitting in the corner. He is doing that all the time, and obviously they are staged. You know, something that we do sometimes even in our personal work. You have basically the person is not clearly visible. It's just a blur movement, so that you get some scale and reference and some amount of life in those images. So some photographers do it all the time, like him, and some like me, and and many others add some frames with these images and not make it consistently a kind of a style. You don't want a style that all my images have people in it or not. It's not something that you're doing it intentionally. Yes, I have some frames with people, so you got your scale and context going already. Now enjoy just the building, sort of thing. Because you're always looking at it as a set of images rather than that one image. Is what I feel, about documenting for for private projects. And most of the time we end up doing small ones. I did actually document large institutional projects in Singapore. I mean, I didn't put it up here. Some museums, schools, maybe some other time. And one of my favorite buildings, Zaha Hadid's Maxi in Rome, one of our pioneering works, earlier works. It's really beautiful, that Rome building. And I had, it was really lucky because I had a lot of people those days. And again, unlike Ivan does, I mean, I curate the kind of people that I want in the scene and where I want them. Like, do I want them in the edge of my frame? Do I want them somewhere where it makes graphical sense in the image? So again, you're curating it, unlike, and you're making it part of the composition rather than by the guys just walking in the scene. So yeah, and that's the other way.
I want to ask you one thing. Now I have a question for you, and I'd really love to hear this. So if you look at different kinds of architecture, like you mentioned Zaha Hadid, a lot of the architecture you showed today was exceptionally beautifully formal. That's beautiful. I mean, such skill and talent in sculpture and building. The other kind of architecture is, stems from a lot of the things I've seen in your own work, the work that stems from the Bawa school, where it's more about courtyards and trees and landscape. How do you find capturing that architecture more difficult than, say, a sculptural building? Are there any things you've discovered that are more challenging?
Yeah, Bobby, one of the reasons that I actually don't shoot as much is, one is I am fortunate that I have this alternate career of architecture, which means I don't really need to depend on photography for my bread and butter. And I choose to shoot for designers or architects, whether it's in Singapore or whether very few in India, whose work I like, simply because I have that option. And when I say the work I like is because I know that if I go in, and also and these designers whom I'm shooting for, I'm consistently shooting for them because they know my style and I know what they like. I'll give you an example. When I was in Singapore, I used to shoot for this company called SCDA Architects. They are known as one of the better design firms. So I think they're the top 3 design firms along with Kerry Hill and Voha, SCDA. Okay, their firm, their work is very contemporary, modern, extremely modern, Bawa-ish, basically. It's basically a Bawa interpreted in the 20th century. So Suken, the principal, was very clear on how he wanted his images depicted. In the sense, he didn't like the too wide angle images wherein you start stretching the corners, and he basically wanted to make his images more focused on certain parts of the building rather than the entire part. How do you take on again, like I mentioned, interiors is about not just about inside, it's about how you connect the inside to the outside, and that's again what is Bawa's work in general as an architect. It's not purely about interior spaces, it's about the connections to semi-open spaces, to nature. Again, how do you bring that about in your photography? So the work that I've been shooting for him was mostly that. There was never a time where I had to shoot purely a bed with a wall. There's this typical shot for most interior and architectural photographers where you go into a bedroom, you keep your camera, you kneel down by the one side of a bed, and you capture one part of the bed along with the side table with whatever the backdrop of the bed is. That's the standard shot, and that happens in generally all interior shots. So, but that is purely showing the play of materials used by the designer, in this interior designer, whether it's the mattress, the pillow, the backdrop, whatever it is. But those shots were not really the ones that he was looking. He was looking at how do I capture the essence of the space in terms of light, connection to outside, texture, colors, nature. So those were very important, which again is, stems all from Bawa's work, and something that I try to capture in the buildings that I get to shoot, simply because I choose to shoot only buildings like that, and that's very fortunate. Not many people are, if you are in an architectural photography world and purely doing that for a living, you may not get that, because not everybody looks at their architecture that way. You will end up having to do scenes where it's purely about a collection of textures and fabrics and materials, which is okay. You still need those images, but yeah, here it's all about how do you create the essence of that space. And so when you keep shooting for a particular firm, you know what they like, their style, and after that they just let you go document and you get a whole set of images. And that's what happened in most cases. Most of these architectural photographers globally have got repeat clients. I mean, you just keep shooting for the same firm because they really love your style of work and you like working with them, and its life is easy. And that's what's happening with me also. I've got 5 or 6 regular clients that I shoot for, and I really enjoy it. Yeah. And yeah, coming back to the question of shooting, when I travel and see Zaha's work and work of star architects, and how it's completely different from what we are doing as an architecture over here. You get a lot more freedom, I feel, shooting their style of architecture, because I feel like when I was shooting the Zadit's Maxi in Rome, because of the curvaceous nature of the building, you can choose any lens in your bag and you shoot. It looks stunning. Yeah, seriously, you don't have to worry about do I use a wide angle, because even if you use a wide angle, all you're doing is actually you're stretching the existing, because she stretched it so much, it already looks like, in real life, it's like, are you looking at a real building, or it looks like a wide angle? Your eyes are playing tricks. And so you are just anyway going to stretch it a little more, and it's just going to look even more dynamic. So it doesn't really matter. You don't have to be so choosy about how you put in your smallest 35mm lens, it still look beautiful. It's just about how you want to compose the image.
Harshan, I'm Sumedia. Fantastic job. I just loved your pictures. One question. This is especially when you talk about commission projects. You're saying about commission projects versus public buildings.
Yeah.
Buildings, I'm sure you're capturing the pictures the way you want to show people. But with the commission projects, do you sit with the designers, try to understand, or do they explain you their concepts, and then you try to showcase your pictures based on their concepts? Or do you first visit the site and then you have a discussion with them? Or did it ever happen that you try to show the picture in some other way, and then the designer said, no, this is not the way I want everybody to look my building, see my building to be. This is not reflecting my concept as such. This kind of things has ever happened with you?
Okay. See, that's a very interesting question. I'll tell both when it comes to commission and non-commission, I'll answer it that way. First, I'll talk about non-commission, then before I come to your question about commission work. Even when I'm shooting non-commission work, like the ones that you saw today, those 4 projects, I completely study these buildings before I go to any of these places. In fact, I would suggest, we being architects, right, all of us over here, a lot of us are architects, if I'm not wrong, or architectural photographers. It is you can enjoy the building a lot more if you actually study and understand the architect's design intentions before heading to a building of a certain importance. Right? It's really interesting to study the building, because the moment you study and you go there, you are not just looking at it like a tourist. You're looking at it from a completely learned viewpoint, where you know why was it done in such a way. Why did, oh yeah, it works. That was his intention. He wanted to place this dome on top of this Medina. It's floating. Yeah, it's working. And then, oh, this is not working. You can choose to, oh yeah, this was the intention. It is not working actually in the way it's supposed to, according to his concept. Oh, it's working. So, and also, like I said, in terms of like how I had gone with Cedric the previous day, and I figured out that if I hang around in the museum too long, by the time I get there, I lose the light. So you study that, and you now next time you go, you just go there right on time, capture it, come back later. So you can plan your route and plan the entire sequence of events. So of course, one of the key things to study is, of course, the direction of light in terms of how the building is oriented. So I take down the drawings. Now coming back to commissioned or non-commissioned, first thing I do, I get a set of drawings from the client with the orientations and their design intent. With the orientations, I understand why has he placed the building in certain direction. Then I can time my visit accordingly to a certain location. If it's a north-facing building, it's the toughest for all of us because there's no direct light on that side. So how do you do it? You go as early as possible, wait for the eastern light to give some amount of bounced light on that northern facade, and back late in the evening, that is about twilight, you capture it again, the northern facade, because you have the glow coming in from outside. That's the only way you can get a northern facade nicely shot. So one of the other things I discuss and I get is all the sketches and the renderings from these designers. So every architect loves to replicate their rendering. If you can say, okay, this is what I had visualized and this is what I have built, as close as possible. I love to do that because the thrill of actually, getting a rendering, and we have done it almost all our projects that we do. I make sure the rendering and I have a photograph that looks like that. So that, and two things it does. One, it shows that you have not deviated so much from your original design intent to what you've eventually built. It's almost the same. It actually, it's a very good marketing tool for the architect as well, Yeah, so to answer your question, I do study, and fortunately for me, I haven't come across anywhere where the architect has come back and said, no, I missed out something, or, I probably don't have to get into that. Because again, now with technology, especially with a lot of these clients, I send them some of my WhatsApp images of my screen. This is the direction I'm heading. I hope you're okay with that, because he's not in location because these projects are across, and they say, yeah, that's fine. Can you, sometimes I get this, can you make sure those pots are all out of the way? I hate pots, by the way. One of the things that you notice in India, in all the buildings, whether it is Le Corbusier's in Chandigarh or the IIM in Ahmedabad, I wish I had IIM pictures which we all had seen. They go and put these little flower pots. These flower pots have no scale at all. They feel they're greening the building. Okay, they have no scale, no relevance. There'll be on each riser or each thread, there will be one flower pot with one dry green plant sitting all over the place in this beautiful composition. And it's so difficult, even if you want to kind of, okay, I'll go and post-product, remove it, you can't. It's very difficult, and they completely destroy images. In India, people love to put these tiny flower pots. And one of the things I have always, if I have an assistant, clear the flower pots first, because I don't want to work on it later. Then all you're working on is the little white, the little wet mark left behind by that damn flower pot, because it's been there for so long. This is really one of my pet peeves. I hate it actually, to see this little out of scale. The pots are never to scale. They're just put in there by some random gardener who feels that you need some green growing there. So those are things that, and many a time actually, you don't get much time to shoot. You're shooting for one and a half days. 1.5, I say, because you arrive by noon the previous day, you get half a day on that day. That half a day, you are actually doing a lot of housekeeping. You're cleaning, you're removing, you're getting to know the site, it's a lot of work. One of the reasons I stay fit is that I can actually do a lot of that work so that the next day I can actually just shoot peacefully. There's a lot of work as an architectural photographer, especially when you go on your own to shoot and you don't have interns from the office coming to help you. Sometimes you get the architect will send 2 interns, which they'll be there with you to help you. But otherwise, it's just you doing all this tidying, cleaning, and then you get these clean images. And then when you leave and go, many times it's left the same way because the house owner is so happy when he comes back and he sees, wow, this looks so nice without pots. This looks so nice, the chair over here, because he wouldn't have, they would have just messed it up over a period of time. Yeah. I remember this one scene. I was shooting a house in Singapore. It's a beautiful house. It's in Singapore. You got these houses called black and white houses. They are these old houses that were built during the colonial British times, which are basically black and white, like the name says. The black rafters and white walls, facades. And so I actually opened up all the. This is for getting ready for the evening shot, the dusk shot. I wanted to get a shot of the building from outside with the inside scene. Basically, you see the furniture. It was done a very Bawaish kind of way, but it's a restoration job, beautifully done. So I cleaned up everything. You put on all the lights, facade light, set it up, opened up curtains, blinds, all the things. And by then, the owner of the house, he is a banker in Singapore. He walked in, he drives in. He looks at, I'm with my camera, he looks at and says, is this my house? Wow, I have to call my wife and tell her this is how we should keep it when we have guests. My family is he's like so excited. He's taking pictures on his phone and he's WhatsApping, this is how we should, when we have guests in the evening, our house should look like this. What is this? You close all the curtains, it looks so beautiful. You can see he's got a lot of M.F. Hussein's real original. He got a lot of beautiful Indian artists this guy had. And you could see it all from the road so beautifully. And he said, why aren't we doing this? This is how it should be. So that's my point, actually. They all have beautiful houses, but sadly, many of them don't know how to live in them, actually. And it's, again, these images, which I sent him a set later, he was so thankful. He said, now we have a reference on how we should keep our home as well. So it's sometimes the job is very satisfying.
I have one last question. So with so much knowledge and experience on visuality, composition, light, which many of us do not have, how does this inform your architecture? Has it changed the way you actually approach architecture now? Because you're also an architect, you're not just a photographer. Yeah. You're a damn good photographer, but you're also a very good architect. Mm-hmm. So how has it, has anything changed with so much new knowledge as you have discovered?
Actually, that's a very interesting question, actually. So every time like I was mentioning about that particular shoot that we did in Singapore, or any other of these shots or this, and fortunately I'm able to shoot buildings that I like. The reason I'm shooting buildings I like, because I learn. So when I am there, I'll give you one simple example. I was shooting another house of a very, very famous interior designer in Singapore. He's actually a globally well-renowned interior designer. His own house designed by another very good, very, very well-known architect. So, but he's just the interior designer. Obviously, he did the interiors and architecture was done. So while I was shooting that, I realized, one, the humility of this man. He was such an amazing man. He's such an important guy. He said, come, let's go out and have a pizza. He brought a pizza. He was helping, he took off his shirt. He's cleaning the floor. This guy is such an important guy. I learned humility, let me say, a lot of things, This is what I mean by going and shooting, and that is one. Number two, I realized that every space, there's this music going on, actually. It's so lovely, He's got these little speakers he's put in. Wherever you are shooting, whether I'm shooting the pool side, the deck side, or the kitchen, or the store, whatever, he's got it wired so beautifully that I have this continuous flow of the same music at a very low volume. It's not like it's blasting around, but you get to feel it throughout the house. And I have made sure that in every project that we go, I've got music now. I believe that that's just one technological thing that I introduced. Even in my home, I've got everywhere. It's a very simple thing to do, but it's beautiful. I enjoyed it. Number two, in architecturally, yes, I learn a lot from the work that we shoot. And I come back, I discuss with Meenakshi that, come on, see, look at this, look at this image. It's not about trying to imitate. It's about the experience that you get. Because I've spent a whole day and a half in this beautifully designed space, and we gain a lot of knowledge. I get a lot of knowledge in terms of, so the thing is, we are a very small practice. We are just 3 of us. Me, Meenakshi, and we have a partner, Dharmaraj, and we only take on projects that we can handle. We draw everything ourselves. We don't have staff, which is why during these COVID times, it is so nice that our office is just what you see over here. We don't have any expenses. It's just us. And so we don't get the choice of doing too many projects. Hence, to be in touch with technology and what's going on outside is a lot more difficult because we are only doing our 3 projects at a time. Because of my travels and able to visit so many homes and places, I can come back with the knowledge and say, hey, we should try this in our next project. Let's look at this material. Let's look at how we can actually incorporate something like this in the next project. It could be just a small element. It could be how the I learn a lot. It has a lot in more ways than one. Yes, Bobby, that was a very
nice,
interesting question actually.
Okay, your great Scotland Yard capture where you have combined the frames. It's very lovely. I mean, it's nice. Could you throw some more light on that? Like, because when you don't have the distance to capture the image, most of the buildings will have this.
One of the key things about architectural photography is to maintain perspective. So if you take a normal camera and you lift it up, you start getting converging lines because you are pointing the camera upwards. Obviously, the lines start going up to a 2-point perspective above. So to correct that, in the cameras that architectural photographers use, we have something called a shift option, where you actually only shift the front element of the lens. By doing that, you are actually moving the image vertically without actually creating this converging lines effect. Now, I have a device in between my lens and my camera, which allows me to move the lens this way. It's almost like scanning. So I get, that's what I showed that image, right? It's in parts. So I get the top part of the building, then I get the center and another top. Similarly in the center and the bottom. So if I take 9 images flat and then I stitch them together, I get that scene. So that can be done only when you have a lens like the 17mm lens that we're talking about, which has got a very wide coverage. Each lens is made only for a certain focal length. If it's say a 35mm lens, it's only meant to cover that much. But if you have the still shift lenses that we architectural photographers use, it's got a wider coverage than what it actually sees. And to utilize that, you need to move the lens around, shift, and then you can shift it and stitch it together. Yeah, so unless I actually put it together and show it. In fact, in my background, you can see that that's a camera. Can you all see that?
Oh. Yes.
That's actually a camera. So what I've got, what I don't have on this now, can you see that? This is where the lens will be fixed, right? It's a hole right now. So my finger goes through. This is a camera, the lens fixes, and this is where the body, that is you can fix it. I mean, for me right now, I'm using a Sony body full frame camera. I can fix it here, or I can fix a medium format camera. And then this thing, this is called a back bellow. This allows me movements. So if you see, it's a little highly technical. I can just, can you see that moving up and down?
Mm.
Yeah. So that's what, and it's absolutely parallel. So it has to stay parallel. You move basically I'm moving the sensor up and down, which allows me to keep the lens steady in one position, but I'm able to get to stitch actually. So this has a lot of functions, this particular camera. It allows me to do something called tilt. Tilting the lens forward, you can control the depth of field. So I am also a little bit of a geek in terms of cameras. I've got practically every architectural setup one can ever imagine in my over here. So I've got various options to use also when I travel, so sometimes I don't carry this. This is highly precise. I have another one which makes it a little more easier, and I have got something more complex in this.
I would want to make 2 small observations here, Harshan. Shweta would be able to correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I used to use her for scale. So whenever we used to go on a tour, she would be standing in front of the building. I would be way behind because I wanted to capture the whole building and make her the scale. So I know what is the height of the building after, that's the way how you use a human for a proportion. And then during our honeymoon, I remember after we came back, we used to use those cameras with the roll. So we never got to see what was being shot. And once you got the photographs printed, every photograph had her in the picture definitely, but she was just like an ant on that big photograph. For me, she was a scale or a proportion to use. And secondly, I remember you talking about IIM when you shot a image and people looked at the screen and said that, wow, it's beautiful, but people could not see what it is there. I have been doing these photographs of Panji during a little bit of walk. I've been posting it on Facebook. It's not a big photography thing. I just use my mobile camera and taken photographs. I posted it on Facebook and I'm seeing a lot of wows on it. You know, Panjim is so beautiful, Panjim is so beautiful. But when we go there, we never appreciate. So, and there are certain things in Panji where we've taken shots and people are not aware where it is. Like people have said it's Fontanish. People are saying it's like somewhere else. But it is right in the heart of the city and people have not noticed it. So I think a photographer's major duty is to bring it forth to the people what you can see. Ask people that they should also see it that way.
So Siddha, actually, you know, normally a painter will paint on a canvas, right?
Right.
But when a photographer paints, right? So when I look at this whole, like if I'm looking there, I can see everything. I choose what I want to put on the canvas.
Correct.
So the photographer is actually choosing, like you said, what you are doing is you're walking around the streets of Panjim, you are choosing certain areas and you're saying, now that's the canvas, now whether it's the Panjim church or parts. And when you take something aside and you look at it, right, that's when you start saying, wow, this looks so beautiful. And we take things for granted when you're walking. We are never actually framing in our minds, you know, that, wow, look at this frame. Look, we are always distracted by the next guy walking on the street or the noise or the sound, and it gets completely lost. So these images kind of restrict your viewership to what you would want somebody to see. And then, yeah, it looks so beautiful. That's what happened with that professor. I restricted him to just looking at that particular entrance, the light, instead of me standing there or anybody. It's just that. And which is why he found it very interesting. You know, I think that sort of mindset over a period of time it's developed, I suppose. And I'm sure a lot of people have developed this. But you're right, a lot of these images really help in kind of, you know, making you aware of these locations or surroundings.
Harshan, you know, I keep thinking about this a lot, what you just said. It's a very, very interesting point. So, you know, sometimes we say to people, oh, I saw your photograph, you're so handsome, or you're so pretty. But when I met you, you're even more handsome, right? I mean, we often say this sometimes. It's like, oh, you look nice, but you're even nicer. So in your experience, you know, as you said, the photograph is like a canvas. You can manipulate it, particularly a masterful, skilled person like yourself, and you manipulate light so brilliantly that you can make almost, like an artist, you can make anything look fantastic. Have you, in your experience, gone to a place where you captured your photograph and then you went to the place and you said, you know, my God, this place is even nicer than it was?
You're right, Bob. Absolutely right. There are occasions when you shoot something, then while shooting itself, you realize, shit, I'm not able to capture the actual beauty of this place. You've already seen in this because you're shooting and you're looking at these pictures. Wow, it's actually far more beautiful than these images. And exactly the opposite also happens many times. When you shoot something, it looks so beautiful. In reality, it isn't as beautiful. But that is what you're doing all the time. But yes, it has happened to me many times that you are not able to put it in words or rather in pictures, the images, the actual essence of that place. And then you are, you know, it's a long day. The day that happens, right, it's really struggling. Then you're coming in. Then what the trick, I guess, I mean, I'm just thinking, is to find little vignettes. You know, you are not able to see what happens many times. It's not able to capture the entire essence of that place. Then you try looking for little vignettes that you think will convey the mood and place that you think the architect will get it. And because you're not able to get the whole space, because it's something else about that space. It's not just about, you can't actually put it in pictures. You know, it has happened many times, more occasion than once. It was an amazing question. Yeah.
Thank you, Harshan, for this wonderful presentation. Amazing photography skills, I think you have, and possibly we should do more of these photographs and show it to us what kind of work that you do, because I think you have got much more photographs than what you showed us today. And I guess we'll get definitely a much better time where we can actually interact with you in person rather than seeing you on the screen, and that time is not far away.